Welcome to The Value of One, The Power of All, a podcast created by the Ron Brown Scholar Program. Since 1996, this organization has been investing in the next generation of African American leaders, and this podcast highlights the stories of the people that make this program special. I'm your host, Ray Pryor, 2015 Ron Brown Scholar, and on this episode, I'll be chatting with 2013 Ron Brown Scholar, Leslie Turner. She's originally from Ohio, earned her bachelor's degree at Duke, and her MPH from Harvard. On the surface, it looks like Leslie has spent the last decade working in healthcare, which is true. But under the hood, she has already had a very multifaceted career. She's been a project manager, a consultant, a researcher, an entrepreneur, an author, a doula, and is a budding entertainer, too. Right now, soon-to-be and recent college graduates are struggling to figure out how to chart out their careers amidst unprecedented dynamics in the market. And it's forcing them to take a long look in the mirror, figure out who they really are and want to be, given the world they're inheriting, and usually have to make some tough decisions. That's something that Leslie knows a lot about. It's not about just your next job or your career, it's about your identity, too. Regardless of what stage you're in your career, we're all having to pivot in one way or another. That's why I hope this timely conversation about Leslie's journey, navigating uncertainty and coaching other people through it, will be as refreshing, validating, and inspiring for you as it was for me. Take a listen. Well, Leslie, this conversation is special. You and I have known each other for a long time. You're probably one of the first Ron Brown scholars, among the very first Ron Brown scholars I ever met. But particularly because we got to spend at least 2 years together on campus. You were a couple of years ahead of me at Duke, and I've always looked up to you and sought you out for advice and inspiration. So it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast, and I appreciate you making the time to be here. Yes. I think the work that you're doing now is perfectly timed with what everybody is worried about, whether you are somebody sitting in your career thinking about what you're doing day to day, whether you are concerned about a loved one of yours or a younger person who's coming out of college and figuring out what they want to do. There was a time when I thought the really tough years to be a young person coming out of school were those early pandemic years. I felt bad for the classes of 2020 and 2021 because we didn't really know what kind of world they were inheriting. And I think for the most part, they figured out their way. But it seems now that moving forward, there's even more uncertainty as it relates to how people are navigating their careers, even more than perhaps the pandemic started. Right. And so I'm really grateful that you're going to give us a little bit of your time to help us at least make as much sense of that as we can. Yes. And I know you've had a lot of experience and expertise here. So where I thought we might start is you and I are similar in that we have a lot of different interests. We could do a lot of different things. We've touched a lot of different things throughout our adult careers. And normally when people ask, so what do you do? It's not just one thing. You've touched public health. You've touched coaching. You've touched startups. You've touched consulting. You've touched a lot of different things so far. So when people ask you what you do or what your background is, how do you articulate it? And what is the common thread you piece together of somebody who's so multifaceted and interdisciplinary?
Mm, that is such a good question. And thank you so much for having me today. I think about that question often. And I think it also depends on who I'm talking to. And I say that because I wear so many different hats, right? So if I'm in my community speaking with young people, I like to use terms that will resonate with what they may be familiar with. So in my current stage, I am a project manager, but I also consider myself an entrepreneur, which includes my coaching and my doula work. If you are someone who I feel is in healthcare and has probably a background in research and some of the other areas I've worked in, then I will give a little bit more of that background essentially to detail. I'm a project manager now, but in the past, I have worked in strategic consulting as well as research consulting to just round out my experience. Something that I've noticed is that depending on who you're talking to, you can either zone in too much or zone out too far, and then you lose people.
Yep.
So I really find myself being super community minded and focused. And so if someone asks me, like you asked me, Ray, who I've known for years, I would tell you I am a jack of all trades, right? I would tell you I do a lot. And the one caveat with that and why, like I said, it depends on who I'm talking to is because sometimes that can be seen as a negative, right? As somebody who does too much, right? I'm often told, Leslie, you need to pick a lane. Leslie, you need to focus. And I just don't think I fit neatly in a box. And that has been my desire actually this whole time. So
Yeah.
having a cultural anthropology background opened up my worldview to there's literally so many nuances and multiple things can exist at once.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm a project manager and right. But again, I don't want to lose people when I try to describe who I am and what I do. So again, it tailors by who I talk to because I can really, fit into various scenarios just because of the range of experience that I have. Like, for instance, I had someone reach out to me recently looking for some support for their nonprofit. And in that sense, I'm wearing my coaching hat, right? So I'm going to let them know, yes, I do strategic coaching, particularly to support organizations with their own growth efforts, right? So again, I like to call out my different hats, but also tailoring it to the audience.
Yeah, yeah, it's a skill of reading the room and knowing who you're talking to. You forgot one hat is as an and as is as an entertainer as well. And as you were talking, it reminded me of that yes and improv game that people that normally at least you improv experts teach us novices about improv and that you always build. It's always yes and then you can be multiple things. And so I like how you articulated that. I felt growing up and I think this resonates with a lot of Ron Brown scholars. If you're more math and science inclined, people just tell you as a smart black kid, go be a doctor. And if you're more English inclined and reading and writing, you're a smart black kid, go be a lawyer. And there is no there's just no concept of that you can be multiple things, let alone anything besides a few things. So
Right.
I guess my question to you is when did you identify that this multi-path career is what you were going to pursue? And when did you like embrace it and say, I'm not going to pick a lane. I'm not going to just pick one thing. This is who I am, and therefore this is going to be me and my best. I'm curious based on how you grew up and what people were telling you Leslie should grow up to be, when it flipped to reject a lot of those conventional ideas of how smart black kids should think about their careers.
Wow. Wow, I love this question so much. And it's because a couple of reasons. So, going back to younger me, to your point, I always thought I wanted to be a physician, right? So when I was like 5, I was just so enamored by my pediatrician. I was like, I want to do what she does. But also young Leslie was like, I like teaching. I would like to be a teacher. And then I also learned about law and I said, oh, I would like to be a lawyer. So at one point, I was actually telling people, like, when they always ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I remember telling someone, an adult, I was like, I would love to be a doctor, a lawyer, and a teacher, but people keep telling me I've got to choose one. And I still remember, and the crazy thing is, I do not even remember this person's name, but I remember what they said. That Maya Angelou saying is so real. That may not, you remember how people make you feel. And he said, you can do it all. And I was like, just wait, what? So, like, I'm not crazy for thinking that I could be all these different things, but that was probably elementary school, right? And he's probably the only person that I actually heard say that. So, fast forward to high school and college, I was still very focused on pre med, and I started to kind of lose sight of the dreamer in me, right? Little Les, who was that ambitious dreamer. I got pretty much challenged just by reality, right? And started to have a bit more of a tunnel vision just so that I could ensure that I would have a stable future for myself. So, my background, I'm a first generation college student, right? So, a lot of my educational and financial mobility support came from people outside the family.
Yeah.
And so at the time, I had a lot of people in my ear pushing me to become a doctor, do doctor, because like you said, I was really good in STEM. I did well, math classes, science classes, and the humanities wasn't really pushed on me. And I actually thought I didn't like humanities, actually. I didn't think I liked social studies. I went into Duke just knowing I'm going to be super science, biology major, pre med, boom, done. And then what changed it for me was getting to Duke. And again, having reality sit in for better and for worse, however you want to think about it. I say for better because it exposed me to cultural anthropology. Cultural anthropology exposed me to multiplicity, right? Of a personhood, of your identity, of how we connect. There is no right or wrong answer, right? This is all a social construct. We made all this up, right? Which means we could continue to make things up and recreate new grounds for ourselves. So as I was going through my cultural anthropology studies, in tandem with studying, pre-med, taking all my classes, I felt liberated in my culture anthropology classes and I felt stifled in my pre-med classes. And every semester I was just struggling and not feeling like I was excelling, right? And I'm used to being a high performer, but I knew I wasn't performing at a rate that I really felt good about. And so, what ended up kind of making that snap that maybe you're not in your right purpose right now was actually a conversation with another Ron Brown scholar. Uh, and that conversation also changed my life, changed my trajectory. So I was taking physics in New York over a summer, right? And I just remember being in that course, and I love New York. I wanted to go to New York so bad and just live my life. But I had this physics course holding me back. I was having to study and do problem sets, and it was just like, here I am in New York, could be outside living, but here I am having to study. And I was telling my Ron Brown Scholar friend about it, like, I just feel so stressed. And she literally brought up the comparison of how artists pursue their work, in that even if they're not getting results or high yield of like positive feedback, they still go for their art. They still produce. Why? Because they're enjoying the process of it, right? They enjoy creating the art. And she essentially said, if you're not enjoying the process, you probably want to rethink if that's the right thing for you. And that hit me to my core, because I really sat and thought about it, and I, pretty much asked myself, if I died today, would I be happy with where I am and where I've spent my time? The answer was no. The answer was no. It was like, I am going for a goal that may or may not come. I am not enjoying the studying, the sacrificing. And that hit me hard, right? Because like I said, it was a total mental shift, because I just knew I wanted to be a doctor. And to your point, I just assumed that was the main way to make an impact in healthcare.
Yeah.
Fast forward to my senior year at Duke. So I took physics in junior year. So that summer came up my senior year. And I was like, let me just give it one last go and really see if pre-med is for me. And I took my one of my last pre-med classes, took the class, did not like how I scored on the test, and dropped it, and officially felt good about dropping pre-med. And again, I feel like I was dropping a piece of myself, right? Because we're talking about, decades of believing I was going to be an MD. But I said, you know what? This is stressing me too much. Let me broaden my scope and just be pre-health and see what else is out there. And so from there, I started to broaden my perspective. And that was how essentially I got introduced to research and then got my master's in public health, etc.
Yeah, man, powerful story and well said. One thing that came up for me as you were talking was about how the calculus around your career choices is a bit different when you're just thinking about you versus you're thinking about being a first gen student, thinking about other folks that over the course of your life, are going to depend on you to fill whatever gaps in financially that they have, or giving support in other ways too, emotionally and the like. And so I know that in a second we can shift our conversation to the how do people make sense of their careers and some strategies around that. But I wanted to ask you about how you thought about that pivot away from a doctor, given a weight that was on you as you were going on that path to think, I have to do, maybe I don't have the luxury of being creative. I don't get to take a risk. I don't get to do something outside the box. I have people depending on me. I'm here. I'm not, it's just not just me here. I do. Everybody behind me is also here. And that, while that is a responsibility I think a lot of Ron Brown scholars carry and we carry with pride, but it also can limit your horizons, like you said. But that reality is still there, and that never goes away, even as you get older. If anything, it increases. So, how have you thought about that as it relates to advice that you might give to yourself to other Ron Brown scholars that might be different than what we would give to a lot of our classmates at Duke, who aren't thinking about the same things, but still might have the same passions and interests, but their choosing not to be a doctor might mean something very different than me and you choosing not to go to grad school or not choosing to go down a different path.
I love this question too. So I think for me, what comes to mind is it starts with self awareness, right? Like to your point, I can't tell somebody the decision they got to make for themselves. Right? You've got to know your intrinsic needs and you've got to know what makes you feel safe now, but also what's going to make you feel safe in the future.
Yeah.
And so where I was at is exactly what you said in that middle crossroad of I'm 1 foot outside of poverty. Right. My family still gets public assistance. But here I am at Duke. Now I'm in a different lane of privilege, if you will. Right. But I still got to think about the people that are cheering for me, supporting me. And I had a lot of people that were like, yes, you're going to be a doctor. You are going to, you're doing it for us. Right. So I definitely had that weight on me. And at the same time, because I bet on myself and at the time didn't realize that was the proper term for it. I was like, I know I'll make another way.
Yeah.
So it was that leap of faith that said, I know I'm still going to be okay because I know me.
Yeah.
Right? I
Yeah.
know me. I know my work ethic. I know my passion to do good. And I know my passion to do the right thing by people and to actually create new systems, create better processes. Like I have a very entrepreneurial spirit about myself. So I'm always going to create. That's just who I am. And I don't really need anybody to tell me. Right. But if you are someone who you just, you appreciate having that extra support or you can't really see the unseen.
Yeah.
I'm going to promote people do what's going to keep them safe, right? In the future, especially because we don't know. So we have to prepare. We have to prepare for our futures. And a lot of times it's preparing for unknowns, right? Like you don't know, for instance, even if you are, Duke privileged, like I said, I'm one accident away from, poverty again. So my career path has to also future proof me.
Exactly.
So at the same time of me saying I didn't want to be pre-med, I still knew there was work to do.
Yeah.
Right. I knew that there was a focused effort that I needed to now take on because, okay, what are you going to replace that ambition with? And so over time, I was just having like, and to be fair, it didn't just come to me, right? It didn't just say go do research, right? It was me having conversations, me being humble and just curious about what I could potentially get my hands on and then doing what truly just felt right, thinking about my goal. So I knew that I wanted to still work in healthcare, potentially working with women in healthcare if I could. So I
Yeah.
was able, again, to leverage the Ron Brown program, the Scholar Connection Network, who then connected me with RTI International. And because I took on that position as an intern, it exposed my world to wow, you can definitely impact health in a research role. You don't have to be a doctor and you can have just as, incredible impact than if you weren't. And so I think allowing myself to be open to other ideas and not letting people direct my path. Because, like I said, I had people that were like, Leslie, you need to be a doctor. When I told them I was changing, they were not happy about it. But the one person who has always had my back and probably a big reason too why I could bet on me was my mother. My mother never questioned any move I made. She's like, I don't know what it is. I don't know what's going on, but I trust you and I trust that you know what you're doing. So if being a doctor does not feel right for you, you're gonna be good. You'll be good regardless.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, Ray, I am so glad I did not pursue medicine. Because like I said, I had to have a real talk with myself because if anybody is mad at me for not being a doctor, that's their business, not mine. Because who's going to be in those classes? Who's taking those tests? I'm not, right? Like, I came to that realization. I like to be outside. I like my weekends. I like a social life. So, whatever my career path is, it needs to fit with my desirable lifestyle today. Right?
Yeah.
I'm living for today. I'm not living for when I'm 50. What can my life look like at 22, 25? Because if I went to and mind you, this whole conversation, I have such an admiration for doctors and the people that do it, right? Because I think I was naive to the level of sacrifice it takes. Once
Yeah.
I realized the level of sacrifice, I said, ooh, that's not me, right? And there are other ways that I think my skill sets and my just lifestyle desires can play a role into the larger healthcare industry without compromising my well-being and just mental health.
Yeah. Wow. Well said. There are two things that came up for me as you were talking. One is that this idea that the only way you, as this person who's going to do something your family's never done before, you got to think about other people, not just your own decisions. That the only way that you're going to be able to do that well is if you just check that doctor box or you check that lawyer box or you. It's a pretty short-sighted version of that person, that the only way they will ever be successful is if they choose this tried and true industry, because they certainly don't have any creativity or ingenuity or ability to create something from scratch. All of the things that made them Ron Brown scholars, no, 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 we don't need any of that. We just need you to take Orgo in physics, right? That's
No,
not true. That
no.
you wouldn't when if you wouldn't think of it like that. And then the second thing that came up for me as you were talking to segue into this next section is that a lot of those tried and true paths they may not be there in the same way anymore. You you might have gotten away with your parents or your grandparents' version of what a smart, hardworking person can do, and as long as you get in this space or go to this school, you'll kind of just be okay.
Right.
You just gotta get past it.
That's
That isn't necessarily the world that
no,
a lot of people are working in. That might be the
no,
riskiest thing that you do is just to choose to be one dimensional. You might
right.
need to reinvent yourself over time. But if you've never done that before, you don't have those skills, you haven't been coached on how to do that, you might find that you're in a really tough spot. And all of the promises that this career was supposed to give you, they're not there anymore. So
That's
I
right.
I would I you shared a stat with me before we started chatting that it's like almost half of people in 2026 are thinking about changing careers. I think that's crazy. Why what is happening that everybody wants to be doing something else? Is it just that the grass is always greener on the other side? We're naive. We always think there's great careers. Or is there something really like I think negative happening that everybody is looking around and saying, no, I don't want it. Not different job, career, different
Correct.
path, different industry, whatever context it means. Maybe it's a different location. People are thinking of starting from scratch in terms of their
Right.
careers because they don't see what they wanted to see out of their current paths.
Right. That's
How did
right.
we get here? What is your sense of? I don't want to call it a crisis, but it
Mm,
sounds like, at least personally, for the person experiencing it, certainly feels like a crisis.
right.
Of but it might be bigger than just one person. It's certainly at a huge level if over almost half the people are thinking
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. No, it is. It is. And they're calling it the great what are they calling it? The great like they're I think great like a great migration sort of
Yeah.
vibe, right? Where and then people are doing things that they call like quiet quitting. People are leaving, right? And I have talked to many of people that are looking to change their careers. Like you said, they're trying to make a pivot. I think there's a couple of things happening that we are seeing in our environments. So, within the past even like 10 years, I would say we're really starting to see a shift of the concept of work-life balance, or what some people will even say work-life harmony, being at the forefront of when you choose your next position.
Yep.
Whereas I think 10 years, prior that wasn't really a goal. It was get money,
Yeah.
right? We need to survive. A career was really seen as a survival mechanism. And employers were able to leverage that, right? And create these conditions that were just not viable, not for long term. So as someone who's worked in different, though I've worked in healthcare only, I've worked in research, I've worked in strategy consulting, and now project management. And even just from my experience and from what I've heard from others, is people are lacking, I would say, three key things. One is autonomy, right? There's a lot of micromanaging going on. And I think there's just a lack of trust from employers, especially with now, a lot of the work from home, and just virtual technologies that are allowing people to be a little less connected. But now employers have a level of distrust. And so there's more micromanaging, which is leading to less autonomy. So people aren't really able to feel that they can lead their careers or just lead their personal lives. I've had jobs where I couldn't even take a doctor's appointment,
Yeah.
right? I had to get approval for that. People have children. People need to take their kids to school, right? And so it's the wear and tear of the lack of autonomy of being able to come and go as I please, or at least be able to make decisions for myself personally and professionally, that's taking people away. Secondly, is a lack of psychological safety, which sort of ties into all the autonomy, but you can have autonomy, but no psychological safety, right? So, psychological safety is also becoming a key buzzword. You may see people throwing it out there, especially as we talk about DEI and belonging and inclusivity. But the psychological safety piece, can I speak up? Can I speak out against the norm? Can I speak out against leadership? Can I propose a brand new way of doing things?
Sure.
A lot of times that is not allowed. You speak up and you get your hand slapped, right? You say the wrong thing and now your whole job is on the line, right? You don't say hi to the right person and now your whole job is on the line, or at least you're going to have a tough time, because that quiet bullying and those microaggressions definitely happen. I've had it happen to me, where there have been situations where I didn't even understand what I did to somebody and they're just being mean to me,
Yeah.
right? They're talking to me crazy, raising their voice at me, embarrassing me in front of other people. And this is just not my experience. This is experiences I'm hearing from people across the board. The third aspect of it that I think is really causing this is the AI technology. People know there's so much more out there, right? So AI is really helping us expand our worldview of what's possible. I could literally go into Chat GPT today and say, look at my resume and give me a list of 20 different careers you think I could be good at, and create the resume and the cover letter and all whatever I need. And they could do it right now. Jobs that I wouldn't even thought about. Oh, I didn't know that existed. I could be adjunct faculty. I never thought about that, right? Like, so things like that. So we're getting new ideas. We don't have to stay in what has just been presented to us. So now we have access to more technology and access to other opportunities that's giving people that privilege of, like you said, like just being more creative, right? Now we've got the tools to create. Whereas before, again, it seemed like career options and opportunities were being told to us versus us really being able to go discover and come back with some ideas that people may have not even realized. Like, for instance, for me, I wouldn't have thought I would be a project manager. That was not on my bingo card. Right. But it is literally the perfect job for me right now that meets all of my key criteria. And had I not been open to change and to reinventing myself and to being humble and curious, I would have never been here, and I probably would be somewhere miserable.
Yeah, yeah, man. Wow, that's well said. I think I recall an interview, and it was a bigger thing that the CEO of OpenAI gave, saying that among a lot of the things that people are using ChatGPT for, figuring out what new job and what new career is very, very high up there. Like, I don't know, maybe it was top 3, top 5. It was surprisingly everybody, nobody says this out loud when you're having conversations with
Yes.
people, but obviously they can see when we're by ourselves with our phones. Everybody is asking ChatGPT, okay, so what am I going to do next? Because this is not working. And yeah, I think that's fascinating. And I know you've had to do this too, make a lot of tough, bold decisions to pivot, to do something different, to change course that maybe you didn't anticipate, you maybe not necessarily didn't even want, but know that you have to do, and certainly didn't make sense to anybody else who was watching your life or thinks they have opinions on what you should be doing, saying, looking at it and like, why are you deciding to do that? Why did you pivot out of this? Why did you transition to this? I thought things were going fine. And certainly your pre-med to pre-health transition was a part of that. Can you walk through some examples on how did you make those decisions? How did you choose that version of yourself that you knew needed to be well and that knew that if you were well would create more value than something that, well, maybe not necessarily safe, like you said, but at least familiar and perhaps normal, understood. Now you're going into a more risky territory, but you know you're going to be more comfortable there. How did you make those decisions? And if you have any examples of some of those tough moments of when you had to do something that you knew wouldn't make sense to people if you tried to explain it at first glance, but you knew perfectly aligned with who you were supposed to be.
Yes, yes. Yeah, this goes back to little Les not boxing myself in. And ever since I feel like it was that pre-med transition that opened the gate for that to start to happen. And I've been pivoting and reinventing myself ever since, right? So I mentioned my pre-med to pre-health transition. Well, it didn't stop there. So I essentially went into research. And what helped me make the pivot from like research to I really went from research to strategy consulting was honestly a personal need. So at that time, I did not feel I did not feel like I was going to reach my highest self without getting that additional certification or that additional studying, right? And I also felt like I was in a role that had a lot of great skills that I was hoping to build on, but not necessarily continue in research. That position allowed me to know what I loved and what I didn't really like. So, taking my experience there, I learned more about myself and then also recognizing you have resources. So I'm also a proponent of evaluating your resources, right? When you're trying to make a change, what is actually available to you and what may you need to do extra to get to that goal. So in my mind, I had set a goal to go to graduate school. However, things can go how they go. But I knew I needed to have certain pieces in line to at least increase my chances of securing that next step. How did I know that was the best next step? Well, again, talking to people, having an internal discussion of, again, if I were to leave this position, would I feel like I left anything off the table? And the answer to that was no. And then the other piece of it was the support that I was getting from my team. So my team also really supported the transition. Now, granted, I would have made the transition regardless, but being able to get that stakeholder buy-in, right? When you're able to get people to rally around you, it makes that transition that much easier because then you get letters of recommendation, you get people that can review your essays, right? So things really started to line up. And then I also had a scholarship. So some things are truly, truly just logistics. That scholarship was going to run out by a certain time. So again, I'm always strategic. I don't want to leave money on the table, right? So that was also a big reason for me to say, I think it's time to pivot. You got the resources. You're feeling like there's a need for change and your bonus is actually you're getting the support from other people to make that transition. And those three things are often not all received at once.
Right.
My other transition where I essentially went from, strategy consulting positions, I didn't necessarily have the as much support simply because I was truly moving out of mental health need. It wasn't a happy moment. So when I've had to transition since, moving from RTI to my master's program, I've had some mental health challenges that then informed the next pivots. And those mental health challenges allowed me to, right? That was another come to self moment of having to see myself differently.
Yeah.
You're not a machine. You're not a robot. You need to eat, you need to drink water, and you need to go to sleep.
Yeah.
Right? When I started to realize I wasn't taking care of myself, that became an indicator that it's time to pivot.
Yeah.
Now, what I will note is that I'm always strategic before I go into a new position. So I always have a goal. What is my intended goal of this role? So when I was in my master's program, I didn't know much about consulting, quite frankly. But what I learned was that healthcare is a business. And what I learned was that I wanted to make some money. Okay. I was like, it's time. I know the goal because part of wanting to be a doctor was hoping I could make six figures. But maybe when I was 40, right? I was happy. I was going to be happy about that. By 40, I can make six figures. Great. But I was like, wait, there are consulting jobs out here. You told me they're paying people six figures. Oh, I need to get on that. Why? First generation.
Yeah.
Right? Why? Because I want to build legacy.
Yeah.
Why? Because I'm trying to make a very safe future, as safe as I can make it for myself, right? So I love what you said is basically taking a risk so that you can become safer later
Yeah.
or become safer right now, right? Because sometimes you do have to go against the grain to free yourself,
Yeah.
right? Like you do. And so that's essentially what I've done in each one of my pivots. But what it really took is truly just that internal look ahead. And one of the fears that I had, at least with going from my research to a master's to consulting, was I don't have business background. How am I going to sell to these people that I know how to do this work? Again, when it comes to mentorship and listening to people, I actually had a colleague who worked at RTI, went to my same school of public health. I was able to connect with her, and she was like, "Oh, you've literally done this stuff already. You just got to revamp your resume." Blew
Yeah.
my mind. Blew my mind. And so that's one of the biggest pieces of coaching and just advice that I bring to people too. 9 out of 10, you have the transferable skills. Whether you're a cook, whether you are a beekeeper, whether you are a hospitalist, there are just certain skill sets that permeate across any job. And as long as you can speak to your position in a way that shows, oh, yeah, they've done that. That's all you need to do is just connect those dots for people, right? And so I just went through more training on how to prep for interviews. I did case prep. So I did my homework, right? If you know you've got a learning curve, that's okay. Don't let that learning curve stop you. The only thing that can stop you is you. And that's what I realized. I am the barrier to it, not nothing else. If I can study and I can prep and I can practice, I can learn this thing. And
Right.
that's exactly what I did. Going from like to your point, just more research, not business, but to more strategic. You're doing cases, you're talking about, ratios and percent increases in market share. I never had to talk about market share. I didn't even know what market share was until I started doing the case prep. But I tell you what, I got the jobs, right? I got the jobs because I practiced, I studied, and I talked to people, and I knew how to talk about my skill set in a way that resonated again with my audience. And that's why I'm so big on continuing to tailor information and data that's in my head for whoever I'm speaking to so that it sticks, so that it resonates. And so I was able to sell to those people. I can come in here and run this, consulting work. And I did. And the one good thing that I appreciate about that jump, I saw consulting as a boot camp, right? So again, I always go into my roles with a goal. I didn't go into consulting to get lost. I went in there saying, I just want an extra boot camp. We're going to do 2 to 3 years, right? So I said 2 years. I probably told myself 2 years. But the caveat is sometimes you get stuck.
Yeah.
And I also got stuck. So I had to reinvent myself again to get myself out of consulting. Because I tell you what, the benefits, they are major, right? But they come with a cost.
Yeah.
And again, me knowing myself, I like to be outside. I like to socialize. I like to have a life. I was living in pain, right? Not living as my true self would like to be because I was trying to make some money, which I do not regret either, right? But I also did it for a short. So it's a goal for me to always at least have an idea of time frame. For me, I don't see my career as a permanent, indicator of where I'm going to be. I see it as, yep, I did that for that period of time, but I'm going to take that experience and do something else great and build, right? I'm a builder. And so I don't try to hold myself into a box. So I always knew I was going to leave consulting. And I'm glad I did do consulting because I tripled my salary, right? And even when I transitioned between consulting firms, I even took a pay cut between consulting firms and still was making six figures, right? And still was doing great and still had over tripled my salary from when I was working in research. When consulting became too tough, then again, like I said, I had to go back to the drawing board. What do you want? What would good look like? Right? Because at the time I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this. And I remember wishing, someday it's not going to be this bad. I would be in meetings until 7, 8 p.m., Monday through Thursday, right? Working real late, some days midnight, some days working on Sundays. And I just remember dreaming someday it won't be like this. And then eventually hit me, well, girl, it don't have to be like this,
Yeah.
right? Like you literally have the power. You chose this job, first of all,
Yeah.
right? So you have to remind yourself, I'm here because I put myself here. Nobody forced me here, which means I can get myself out. So once it just kind of came full circle that I didn't have to do this, I got a dream, I got to think bigger. I just threw what I wanted out there. I said I would love a job with unlimited PTO. I would love to still make six figures. And I like project management
Yeah.
in healthcare. So where can I find it? And I kid you not, right? I found exactly that. And that's where I'm at today.
Wow, what a story and a lot of great lessons. I want to zoom in on one particular part before I circle back to some advice that for people who are thinking about making this transition, but back to the moment that they're in when they're starting to ask ChatGPT about what their other options are, starting to think about those things. It's one thing to be in a job where you've reached the ceiling for what this role can give you. You plateau.
Mhm,
It
mhm,
might be because you're bored. It might be because you're not on the right team. It could be that you are just excelled and you just need to grow. And that may not happen at this role or perhaps within this organization. That's one way that you can say it might be time for this chapter to close. It's a whole nother thing when you're burning out. You are you're not well. Your body is trying to send signals of warning signs and check engine lights and all those things. Sometimes they can come together. They're not mutually exclusive, but I think they're different things. Burning out isn't necessarily the same as knowing that it's just time for me to move on and to grow. But I guess I'm curious, how do you know the difference
mhm,
of which one do you listen to? Or how do you know diagnose which
mhm,
one you're in, perhaps is a better way to ask it. How do you know whether you're just feeling awful about where you are, what you're doing, how you're spending your time is because you're ready for the next thing, or because there's something deeper going on that requires more introspection, more support? How do you think about the difference
mhm.
of those? It all leads to the same destination. You need to get up out of wherever you are. But the approach, I
Different.
think, is different depending on which of those seats that you're in.
I agree completely. I agree. And it's a fine line, right? And sometimes one is, informing the other and it just becomes a cycle.
Yeah.
But to your point, they are distinct. When I think about plateau, I think about I'm well, but there's just another goal that I want to reach, right? So I am mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally taken care of, right? I don't feel scared to go to work. I don't have, those Sunday scaries that they talk about. I mean, you may just be like, I'm bored, that's why, but I'm not scared, right? I don't feel that somebody is going to attack me or bully me, right? Those are the things I don't have to worry about that. But I go to work and I've got the same repetitive, things. And it's clear that what I was doing, last year, I'm probably doing the same thing and I'm doing the same thing year over year to where it's very objective, right?
Yeah.
Anybody could come in and say, yeah, it doesn't seem like you're growing. And you've probably have tried to talk to leaders or your manager, et cetera, to say, hey, may I get some more opportunities? And if you feel that you are being, zoned and those opportunities are not being presented to you at your organization, then that's a plateau. Burnout is I can barely even wake up, right? My house is dirty. I can't take my dog out because I'm so stressed from work, right? I got 10 p.m. meetings that I have to be on. So, no, I can't cook dinner. So, yes, I'm gaining weight, right? Because I'm eating unhealthy. My skin may be breaking out because, again, I am giving parts of myself that I really don't have to give. And it starts to show in those physical ways. You start to be you start to lose sight of who you are physically and also internally. Like, I feel like, at least for me, there's just that internal pressure of just something doesn't feel right. I don't feel like I'm being respected. I feel like my work is not being acknowledged. There's no reward, there's no incentive. And even if there are incentives, they're not enough, right? They're not enough. So burnout can be the opposite of plateau, right?
Yeah.
You're in a high paced environment. I've been in those where it's like you're on something new every week, right? So you have no worry about ever plateauing because you're constantly, that's part of the burnout, right? Is that you're actually being overworked. You're constantly having to be introduced to new stakeholders, new environments. That's a lot of energy. Right. And so when your body starts to shut down, like I said, whether it be mentally, emotionally, or you just realize I literally do not care how I show up, that's burnout because you probably don't have any more cares to give, right? Whereas you can totally plateau and still just show up to work, probably, do the bare minimum, but you're not feeling just stressed. You're probably just online looking for, new jobs, right? Because you still have the energy to do that.
Yeah.
Burnout people can barely even do that. At least for me, I know when I've been burnt out, I needed a break just to refresh myself and to get back my sanity so I could start applying for other places.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you kind of drawing the line there of how some similar but different those experiences can be
Yes.
warrant different approaches. We talked about how a lot of people are using AI to help with this. A lot of people are searching online. What tools do you recommend people look to, maybe just to start when they're just like self-serve tools, like things that they're just going to do
Mhm.
in their solitude or on their free time? It could be AI, it could be searching. Do you have any like go-to resources or just maybe just mindsets on how to approach that when you're thinking, I'm at that spot, whether it is the burnout or whether it is the plateau? I need to do something different. It might need to be something more than just a new job. It might need to be a bigger pivot. How are there certain places that you have found are helpful to for people to start with, or things that help people get started with how to process what that might mean for them and then what steps they should take?
Great question. I usually would start with and recommend two questions, two very high level questions. What do I want to do? Right? Like, literally give yourself that opportunity to dream. Be a kid again. If I could take away just all the societal expectations and unnecessary pressures and just negativity and all that, what would I really be doing? Like, what would make me feel so aligned and peaceful? And like they say, like, what's the thing you could do you would like to wake up and do every day?
Yeah.
Kind of start there. What is your dream role?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that your dream role can be multifaceted too. It can be, I want to be this in the short term, but I want to be this in the long term. And I think both are totally fine. Like, for instance, for me, yeah, I'm in healthcare, but believe it or not, and it may all start making sense, I would love to be an actress.
Yeah.
Right. And like, I have not done anything like professionally with acting, right? But that's like a longer term goal I can see for myself. So what am I doing in the short term? Improv,
Yeah.
stand up comedy, doing those fun and creative things because to what we were just saying as a kid, the arts were never really impressed upon me to pursue. So I was so tunnel focused on STEM careers that's where I spent a lot of my time and my energy. So being somebody that's strategic, I'm going to leverage what I have. Hence why I have focus my efforts on healthcare because guess what? We gotta eat. I gotta eat. And I've always told myself I do want to do good things in this world and I would love to pursue my passion, but people gotta eat. I gotta eat. And I want to be able to make more opportunities for people to eat. And you need capital.
Yep.
You literally need capital, and then everything else comes from there. So that's been my focus is building my capital, building my financial capital and my social capital. So then in the future, I will have more flexibility to just even continue to spread my wings. But in the short term, I'm going to do what still feels good because both things can be true, right? You can still do things that feel good in the short term, but may not be like your big dream goal, but they're still okay. So that's what I would ask. What do you want to do? Short term and near term. What would feel good? And then what do you need to get there? Because knowing what you need to get there then informs all the different, tools and etc. But far as what you want to do, obviously there are like those Myers-Briggs and like MBIT and like career assessments, which I have leveraged and I think can be really helpful to just at least understand personality wise what could, help me. But then how do I get there? I especially leverage if you have a career center or just any college's career site. They usually have a ton of resources that will help you with interview prep, resume prep, cover letter. When I was in school, I was, at least in my master's program, I was constantly working with the career center to have them give me the expertise. I don't know it all. So a lot of it is just reaching out to any career focused people that you already know and then another tool that I like to use is LinkedIn. I am really big on LinkedIn when it comes to just searching and getting an idea of what's out there. Because actually, by the time I applied for any of my jobs, I had an idea of what the market was looking like, right? I knew pay ranges. I pretty much knew what type of job descriptions by just like stalking LinkedIn, particularly looking at the open jobs because you can search for and apply for jobs directly in LinkedIn. And then, I don't use a lot of like tools. Honestly, I kind of use my people. People, I would say, is my biggest resource. And just having those coffee chats, networking, the Ron Brown program has especially been a major resource that I often plug into. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I would say those are the main.
Yeah, no, I mean that was a great list, and I think is at least great to get folks started to think through this. There's a lot you can do, leveraging your network, leveraging different tools, taking assessments, knowing yourself more, having those real honest conversations with yourself about what you want. And for some folks that will be sufficient, but for a lot of folks it won't be. You this might be something that you can't just sit in with you and your brain going back and forth and just reach a conclusion that you feel happy with. Sometimes it's helpful to get more voices in your head, different voices in your head, other perspectives to help with that. And so, in your experience working with your clients, what do you think separates somebody who is fine using those tools versus somebody who could benefit from a coach that sits down with them and walks them through either thinking about things in a different way or even walks them through some of those tools, but opens up how they're thinking about things a bit more than just what they can do on their own.
Yes. I think that the major distinction between people who may be trying to do self-service versus leveraging coach are people that are really trying to discover the right answer and not a band-aid solution.
Yeah.
Right. So one of my certifications is in peer coaching, which I got from Harvard through their peer coaching initiatives. And the way that we coach is actually through asking questions. The answer reveals itself in the question. Because what you often may think is the problem is often just a surface level problem. So, for instance, like we were saying, burnout, somebody comes to me and says, yeah, I just don't feel like I'm able to show up as my best self. Like I'm being overworked. I'm not getting the accolades, et cetera, et cetera. My question would, I mean, well, my response wouldn't immediately be just find a new job, right? Because that could lead you down a rabbit hole that's just not actually focusing on what the truth. Because you could go get another job that's just gonna put you right back here, right? So doing that self-service, you're not gonna really probably challenge yourself in that way. You're just gonna think, I need a new job. Let me go find a new job. Boo, off to the races. What a coach is gonna do is challenge even that perspective to get you to kind of flip your ideas on their head and really throw them against the wall and see what sticks. Right. So if you come in and you tell me I'm feeling those things, I don't feel like, right, like I feel like I'm just being overworked. My question, I would ask a question back essentially to understand more about what would good look like,
Yeah.
right? What is your desired day to day? Because I'll tell you what, Ray. Oh, I have people that love to work. So I know that that's not an automatic red flag,
Right.
right? Working hard is not a red flag because there are people who love to work,
Right.
right? So I can't just come in automatically assuming because you work hard that you need to change your job.
Yeah.
Right? It's probably something else then because you like to work hard. So then I'm gonna ask a little bit more about what is that environment? What do you feel, right? What do you feel? So if someone tells me, well, the reason why I'm rushing or like, working till 10 is because I feel like I am going to get, reprimanded or etc. So then to me, that starts to bring up the question of psychological safety, right? So it sounds like really what it is you're not feeling safe at your work. Okay, well, what would psychological safety look like for you?
Yeah.
And like really just trying to unravel that, right? So then now we have an idealized work situation and an idealized personal way of dealing with work. Now we can start going into discovery of figuring out what your next best move could be. Because it could be, hey, you need a break. You don't need to go find another job yet. You need to do a gap year, or, you just need to go on vacation, right? And then we could come back to this. So it really is asking the right questions to reveal the right answer and not just trying to tell people what to do, especially when you probably haven't like gone all those layers deep to really discover self because this is a very personal process. And I think a lot of times it is not really seen as like I got to look within myself and my mental model for how I see myself, right? That's really what it is. It really gets deep into how you see yourself and then everything comes after that, not the other way around. You don't get the job and then see yourself.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah, that's great. The self-concept is where it starts. It reminds me of this show that I watched. It was a therapist talking to a client, and the therapist basically wanted the client wanted the therapist to tell them what to do. And the therapist responded and said, I don't really give advice. I make observations
Mm,
and I pose questions. That's it. I don't tell you what to do. That's not what we're here.
mm,
And obviously coaching isn't directly therapy, but just the spirit that what we're doing is not we're not executing a task. We're not just getting you a new job. We're going inside you in a way that you can't really do on your own. And I am trying to peel back the layers of that. And it's at least a skill that those practices are strong in. I've had the fortune with this podcast and with the Venture Lab and a lot of different hats that I wear to meet a lot of Ron Brown scholars and hear them talk about what they care about and hear them talk about their careers, talk about their passions, talk about their values. And what I've walked away from all of those conversations with hundreds, probably at this point, different scholars, is that the most important decision that they make is what they choose to work on. That when every scholar is a genius, is the hardest worker, is brilliant, is savvy, has all of the intangibles and the tangibles, and you throw on the fancy degrees, there's nothing that any of them can't do. So it is never going to be a you can't do it or you don't have it or that's not what we're talking about.
right,
What
right.
you might have though is that you chose the wrong thing. You didn't pick the
Yes.
right thing to work on. You didn't pick the right space to be in. You didn't pick the right environment. You didn't bet on yourself at the right time. And I don't think being a straight A student and going to Duke and then going to Harvard and getting a grad, I don't think any of that teaches you how to do that. None of it necessarily teaches you how to choose the right problem, choose the right organization, choose the right space, choose the right version of you to manifest and to bring out. And I think that across all the different things that we've touched today, it's another reminder of that. That of all of the things to give thoughts to, where you go to school, yeah, sure, that matters. Yeah, what you study, yeah, that's important. Where you, but you are a prized possession. You are a rare commodity. You are a scarce resource. You should not throw you somewhere where you're not supposed to be. You need to spend a lot of time, and maybe not literally time, but a lot of thought needs to go into where you're going to put this thing that is you, because you wouldn't do that if it was something else. You wouldn't just say, oh yeah, it'll be fine, whatever. We're not going to give a whole lot of thought into it because this is what smart kids do, or this is what all my friends are doing, or this is what my parents want me to do, or this is what it's either way. Even whether you know it now or whether you know it before, whether you learn it later, as you said, your body is going to reveal it to you. It'll shut you down whenever it's ready. It will shut you down. So this has been extremely insightful for me personally, as well as I think for a lot of other folks. You are having these conversations with people all the time, helping them navigate the maze of all of the things that they want to be, and also the realities, the economic realities, their personal finances, all of those things. Some folks are getting by going on LinkedIn, talking to their network, ChatGPT. Some folks might not. That might not be enough. Where can folks find you and keep up with you and what you're doing, and stay in touch if they find themselves in a need to continue this conversation that we just started here?
Yes, I would love to connect with anyone interested in just wanting to know more about this or anything tangentially related. And I can, as you mentioned, I have my LinkedIn profile just under my name, Leslie Turner. And then I have my business email that you all can reach out to. That is lbmtsolutions@gmail.com.
Awesome. Okay. Well, Leslie, this has been great. Thank you so much for your thoughtfulness and insightfulness, your vulnerability and honesty and authenticity. As somebody who's known you, I guess now for, I guess a little over a decade, none of that is a surprise. Even you being an actress is not a surprise, but it is really powerful and refreshing amidst all of the anxiety and uncertainty that exists in the world as young people are making these decisions, that they can hear from somebody like you. And I'm fortunate to have heard from you for years, but I really am grateful that we were able to come together and do this on this platform, where hopefully a lot of other scholars and other people will be able to benefit from it too.
Yes, I hope so. I just want to spread some good love out there. So thank you so much, Ray. This has been such a great experience and looking forward to the next one.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Value of One, the Power of All, a podcast created by the Ron Brown Scholar Program, presented by the Ron Brown Venture Lab, and sponsored by Spirit Capital. If you want to hear more inspiring conversations like this one, don't forget to click subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And to learn more about the organization, check us out at ronbrown.org.